Jason, great to see you, my friend.
This is always highlight of my week, Garth. It's good to see you too. Looking forward to this episode, that's for sure.
Yeah, this episode is about leading with inclusivity and respect at its core, but really we've been brought to this notion of belonging. So, Jason, I'm reading another book. It's called The Art of Gathering
Love it.
by Priya Parker. You've read it before.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Recommend
Okay.
it all the time.
Yeah, so she writes, in my experience, there are certain magic numbers in groups. Every facilitator has his or own her or their own list, and these are obviously approximation. But she says 6 or 12 or 15, 30, and 150 are great group sizes for different purposes. So, Jason, you work one-on-one with people, you work in small groups with people, but you also command an audience of larger people, like a larger audience, like a larger group of people. How do you make a large audience have a sense of belonging with you?
Wow, that's a really good question, Garth. I think it always starts with something personal but connected. I think if you could create a narrative, a story that's relatable, that has a generalized truth that everybody can experience in their own space, it brings them to the message, to the story, to the event,
Nice.
and then everybody feels like they belong. They belong as a part of that crowd because we have a shared experience. So I think there's a certain magic in um, creating a narrative that is inclusive and personal at the same time, and leaves a bit of a dangling question mark, so people wonder what it's about and how it's going to relate to the day's activities. That's
Yeah.
how I do it.
Nice. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. What about you, Garth? You talk to huge groups as well.
Yeah.
What's your secret?
You know what? I'm gonna borrow an experience here from iScene. I've talked about iScene before, the Independent Schools Experiential Education Network. And at the end of our Winter Institute, our executive director, she loves this. She puts on like one of those dance videos, video game type things, and she gets everybody to dance. Jason, I'll be honest with you, I usually am the observer at the back. Uh, but it is amazing what an experience like that, which makes you feel ridiculous, makes you feel like you've worked a little bit, makes you feel like you're a part of something because you're dancing next to other people. The room elevates after that. And I love that she loves it. Our executive director loves it. I love the reactions that people have. They do feel like they belong a little bit more at the end of that conference. So,
Well, I think, and bringing that full circle into today's podcast, we speak a bunch about belonging, about the importance of vulnerability, being open to asking questions, being curious, not judgmental. And I think, the experience that you've just shared, Garth, really does articulate that. And I think really does allow people to create that sense of belonging in the
yeah,
environment. So I'm glad you shared that.
we we even revisit our analogy of the party. So there's dancing involved in this too. All
Right
right,
on.
that's enough from us. Enjoy the episode, everybody. Thanks.
Enjoy. Thanks for listening.
With Garth and Jason, we dive right in, breaking down Ted's world. Let's begin from AFC, Richmond's Field to your day to day. Lassoing Leadership's here to stay. Keep leading the lasso away. Together we'll grow stronger every day. So plug in your headphones and let's start the show. With lessons from Ted, we'll learn and grow.
Welcome back to Lassoing Leadership. I'm Jason Rogers, joined as always by my co-host Garth Nichols. Garth, good to have you back, buddy.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. Today we're wrapping up our discussion on leading with inclusivity and respect. And though let's be honest, Jason, this conversation is never really over. It's an ongoing journey. But this podcast, for me, and I know for you too, is just one amazing further step for us.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Garth. Over the past 2 episodes, we've explored what it really means to create an inclusive space, a space of belonging, not just in theory, but in action. We've reflected on our own learning as leaders, discussed key frameworks and some of the research and real world experiences, and had the incredible opportunity to speak with Nicole Cozier. I have to say, Garth, speaking to experts in the field is always my favorite part of this podcast. Nothing taken
Such a
away
gift.
from you, But it was nice to speak with Nicole, hear her voice, and talk about belonging at Havergal College and the work that she's been doing, not just over the last couple of years, but over a lifetime by the sounds of things. So
Yeah.
that was really, really fun. Thanks for opening that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, it was great to have her. She's my friend. She's my colleague. She's doing such great work. And that conversation with Nicole, I think, really pushed our thinking. Like, we started this series with the analogy of a party, right? Where diversity is being
Yeah.
invited, equity is making sure everyone can get in, inclusion's being asked to dance, maybe the playlist, etc. But belonging is feeling like the party is yours. And Nicole challenged us and pushed our thinking even further to say that belonging isn't just being part of the party, it's about having that ownership and agency over it. So creating the guest list, making decisions in the moment. So I really enjoyed that expansion.
Totally. And it's such an important distinction. And too often organizations might just stop, somewhere in that process. When I think about the topic, for me, it's really about belonging, creating these spaces where everybody
Yeah.
belongs, seen, heard, loved, valued. Simple words, but I think very, very complex when you bring them all together. And I've spent, I think we spend a ton of time thinking about this notion in our schools as they need to be places of deep belonging for parents, students, staff, for our communities. I think it's really, really a part of what we do and what makes our schools really special. And I'd like to think that, folks in business who are working outside schools and organizations are thinking about these things too. And I think we get there through conversations like this in this podcast, or with our friends, or with experts like Nicole. We get there through empathy, and we get there through understanding and committing to that process.
Yeah, and those are great comments, Jason. Always appreciate that. And honestly, this has been a learning experience, as I said, for both of us as two white men working in education, right? One of my biggest takeaways from this conversation is that inclusion isn't a finish line. It's not something to be checked off like, oh, we've reached the end. It's a practice, and it's about ongoing self-reflection, making time for that, recognizing our own blind spots, about committing to trying to do better every day, committing to making good on mistakes you might have made. And all this requires work. And that work, and I think Nicole would echo this too, that work begins with yourself. Like, you have to start here first. And that work requires something, Jason, you and I talk all about, and something in Ted Lasso too, which is you can lead more effectively with vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's the essence of leadership and this podcast. I mean, we can branch this out well beyond belonging, but I think that idea of, leadership is a journey. And I think that's part of, committing to this podcast, people who are listening, but also us recording it, and recognizing that we don't have all the answers. We're just on this search for meaning, if you will. But, all we can do is, and encourage our listeners to do, is to keep showing up, in this studio, in our schools, in the podcast forum, and all over the place. Keep listening to each other, and keep stretching ourselves to find, best, honestly.
Yeah. To find best. I love it. And I was just in Ottawa for a conference, and the conference was for Round Square, and it was really interesting for me because we had members of Round Square from South America, from Central America, and from North America. And we were talking about this. We had some beautiful moments at the Native Women's Association Center in downtown Ottawa. And we were talking about the work that needs to be done. And sometimes we started getting into policies and programs. And certainly when it comes to belonging, you can make policies around that. You can make programs that enhance that. But from a leadership perspective, Jason, I think it's about how we move through our hallways, how we move through our organization, and ultimately how we move through the world as leaders. It's how we listen. It's how we show up in difficult conversations. It's how we stop our day at the drop of a hat when these types of moments come up, where we can either fix something or we can create a space to develop more belonging. And ultimately, it's how we empower others and give others the agency to feel like they do and can, make this space, this office, this work, this project, make it their own.
I mean, you really remind me of two things there, Garth. First is a callback to Ted Lasso, which is namesake of this podcast. And one of his hallmark phrases, which I think we aspire to be, is to be curious, not judgmental. And I think that's pretty
Yeah.
critical, and it's a great reminder day in and day out as to how we want to lead. Sorry. And Garth, something you said earlier in an earlier episode has always stuck with me, and you made reference to a book, Outrage by Kurt Gray, and how it talks about the power of moral emotion. Sometimes when we're faced with conversations about belonging, our first instinct is to react, maybe to feel defensive, and maybe we feel guilty, and maybe we feel overwhelmed. Any of these things, or I'm sure many more emotions. But real leadership, and this is a hard part, Garth, is, means pausing, listening, and choosing to engage with an open mind are critical in our leadership.
Yeah, and that book goes a long way to help us understand why that is important. I really, really like that. And it talks about, I think when we talk about, sorry, being confronted with emotions, someone comes to us and they're sort of highly activated. Our tendency is the human mind is to mirror and get back, like retaliate or to react in those moments.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we respond, right? Is what
Mm-hmm.
Kurt Gray talks about. And we're like hoping to get him on this podcast, which would be amazing. It also connects to something that Nicole said in our last episode, which is about the importance of humility. Sometimes, we react because, as you said, Jason, we are defensive. But if we are truly humble, that we can learn more, that our organization can be better, then we take all feedback as a form of a gift, and you use that a lot. So the work isn't about perfection. It's about being willing to learn, be corrected, keep trying. So in the spirit of that, Jason, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot. What is something that you have or maybe are doing or will be doing to be a more inclusive leader?
That's a great question, Garth. And I think about two things actually. One was today, and we're dropping this tomorrow, so it's in real time. We hosted a session called Pathways to Teaching at Rundle, and part of the Pathways to Teaching is to lay out a curriculum as to how we want to live in our world at Rundle. And we had a great session with teachers, and one of the teachers, we were talking about belonging, and we're actually talking about parent-teacher interviews. And the teacher said, hey, listen, when I go into PTIs, I'm nervous. And somebody else said, hey, listen, I talked to a parent the other day, and they're actually nervous about PTIs. And we started to talk about, the reflective energy that comes out of nervous on nervous and how that could end up creating these situations. So all we posed to each other in the course of this workshop was, what if you went in curious or empathetic? And what might that do to the nervous energy that's coming into the room? So I think continuing to think about that is really important in our practice, and having these conversations that are vulnerable and open about the challenges that we have. And the second is, I think we need to continue to delve into all levels of diversity. I think about Henry, who came on our show not long ago, and
Nice.
he was talking about, physical disabilities and that being a diversity that he's faced with, and remaining open to those conversations with Henry. And I have to be honest, Garth, at my heart and at my core is neurodiversity. And certainly we have an academy program, and thinking about how those kids experience the world and how they also belong in the world and feel a sense of belonging, ownership, empowerment, and trust. And so I think, as I move forward, I continue to think about what belonging means for all of those folks, whether it's, the nervous parent or the Henry who's thinking about physical disabilities, or all of our great students at the academy. So that's where I take it from here, Garth. What do you think?
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of what happened at a previous school, which was amazing in terms of neurodiversity and that feeling of belonging. And it was in conjunction with the University of Toronto. And one of our amazing faculty at this school led us through what it would be like if to listen to a person speaking while having a PowerPoint going. And it was awesome to put you in a situation where you were cognitively, under a bit of duress, and then developing a whole bunch of strategies to make sure that every student felt like they belonged in the classroom. And as we know, this is something I subscribe to, anything that's good for neurodiverse learners is good for all learners.
Yeah.
So that's really nice, Jason. And I know that neurodiversity is near and dear to your heart, so I appreciate that. But for me, I mean, I think back to some of our amazing guests and the stories they've told, whether it's the captain of the Calgary, but Calgary, what's the soccer
Cavalry is, come
team?
on, it's the champions, Garth.
The champions, the cavalry,
Carducci, yes.
and Mark. Yeah. And I think back to Phoebe Trotman. I think back to Virgil Hill. They've told us these amazing stories about their journeys, and I really, really appreciate that. And so for me, I want to bring this to our listeners because I think this is a really great fundamental step that you can take. I really love reading. You know that about me. I read everything, fiction, nonfiction, young adult, academic journals, the whole bit. And I read, but I do read a lot of fiction. I make sure that fiction is there for me because it's an exploration of the lived experience of others. And I was reading Discovery Magazine the other day. It had a great article. It's called "There Might Be Some Truth to the Beloved Quote, a reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies." So researchers are saying that reading fiction can actually show us different viewpoints, shape how we relate to each other, and build our empathy. So I encourage our readers to read a lot and be careful with their choosing. If they're looking for recommendations for great fiction that build empathy, I'm happy to take any and all calls.
Unbelievable. I totally appreciate that, Garth. I mean, I don't read enough fiction, but I find that when I do, it provides me with a perspective I might not otherwise have taken. And I tend to learn more from that than I do
But
sometimes reading nonfiction.
but you enjoy biographies.
I do enjoy biographies. Yeah, I think I do, but I think there's some
Yeah.
color that comes in fiction that you don't pick up in biographies. And I think that needs to
Sure.
be a takeaway for
Yeah.
me. So as we wrap up this
Yeah.
series, Garth, we want to leave everybody with a challenge. What's one action you will take to be more inclusive leader? Maybe it's amplifying voices that always get heard, like Henry's, for instance. Maybe it's examining the structures within your organization that reinforce exclusion. Maybe it's just having a conversation that feels a little bit uncomfortable, or perhaps maybe it's picking up a fiction book that you wouldn't otherwise pick up.
Yeah. Absolutely. So whatever it takes, take that step because Jason and I, we aren't just talking heads or voices in the in the interweb. We are trying to put this into action, and we would love to hear about your experiences of trying to put this into action. Anything that could help us out and help out our other listeners too.
Yeah, absolutely. So bring those questions to us. You know how to reach us at lassoingleadership@gmail.com. Connect us within LinkedIn, Spotify, Instagram, all of the channels. We're here and we want to hear from you.
Yeah. Jason, it is always great connecting with you on this podcast. I do love it. So thank you, sir. Thank you. And until next time, keep leading the Lasso way.
Thank you, Garth. Thanks, everybody.
All right, take care.